All right. Welcome, everybody, to your Ron Brooks Show on this New Year's Eve. So thank you for joining us on New Year's Eve. I really appreciate that. It's good to have you all here. I'd appreciate it if somebody could comment on the sound, just to make sure sound is good. What do we have? I don't see any sound. 1, 2, 3. You guys got sound? No sound here. Why is there no sound here? Can you hear me? 1, 2, 3. All right. We'll see. Maybe this is not working. Okay, sound is good. Everybody says sound is okay. That's good. We'll get rolling. For some reason, the speaker is not. I can't see the sound on speaker. So whether that is working, we'll find out from the podcast later on. Again, thanks everybody for joining me on New Year's Eve. I know this is a time where you want to go out and celebrate. And I was thinking, actually, I think I screwed up because I was thinking just a few minutes ago, I was thinking of the fact that why am I doing a 2020 year in review, which is basically a pretty depressing topic, on a day when we really, on an evening when we really should be celebrating, because hey, it's the end of 2020. I am super excited by the fact that it is the end of 2020. I've never really said that before on another year, but this year has really been one that has challenged me and everyone else. It's been a horrific year, and we'll talk about that. All right, so let me tell you what is going on today. We do have a match, a challenge. So we have a dollar for dollar match all the way to $5,000. $5,000. So we have an anonymous benefactor on, and they will match dollar for dollar $5,000. So I hope all of you brought your checkbooks and are ready to write big checks. Thank you, Linda. Thank you, Roland. Thank you. I think that's Mark. Thank you, guys. I really appreciate it. This is a great opportunity. It's too loud. I know there's something about this system that is way too loud. Let me make one adjustment. All right. Thank you, Josh. All right, is that better? Let me know if that's better. I think I should have lowered the volume. Thank you, Ragnar of the Desert. May the world have more reason, purpose, and self-esteem in 2021. No kidding. Absolutely. Let me also just tell Alejandrina, who is actually monitoring the money coming in, that we start today with $200. I got $200 and 4 questions from Mika, so I will get to those questions, but you should add $200 to whatever your count is so far. So there's a long way to go. It's going to be a long evening because it's definitely a challenge to get to $5,000. This is not going to be easy. Hopefully, we'll get a lot of people joining over the next couple of hours, and maybe Jonathan Honing will actually get his wish and we'll finally do a 3-hour show. So I don't think I've ever quite gone 3 hours. I think we've gotten close a couple of times, but if it looks like I need to go 3 hours to get $5,000, that's what we'll do. I hope not, because 3 hours is a long time. Thank you, Jennifer. Really appreciate that. Of course, you can use the SuperChat feature to ask questions. Questions about 2020, 2021, questions about anything. I've already got a question about a crazy hitchhiking story or military story. So I'm going to combine it and tell you a story about hitchhiking. I'm going to tell you a story about, not about hitchhiking. I'm going to tell you a story about hiking in a minefield. I'll tell you a story about hiking in a minefield when I was 17 years old. I don't know if I told you this story, so maybe somebody can tell us if they've heard the story before or not. But but I'll tell you that story as well. Of course, you can ask for other hitchhiking stories. You can ask about military stories. You can ask about, you can ask about the day I drove up to Beirut to interrogate a potential spy, and drove back to Tel Aviv from Beirut that night, and kind of the little adventure that constituted. So we can get personal tonight. You can ask personal questions. I'm going to leave it up to you. But yes, I drove a Jeep, all by myself and my commanding officer, from Tel Aviv to Beirut and back in less than 24 hours, or in about 24 hours. But you can ask those kind of questions. Hitchhiking in a minefield doesn't sound rational. No, it's not rational. There's nothing rational about it. It was insane. And it was not, believe me, it was not done purposefully. And you'll find out more when I get to the story. But I have to keep you in suspense because I need to keep you around, and I need to basically say, hey, if you want to hear the story, then bring it on, right? So bring on the dollars, right? That's the story. Thank you, Jessica. Thank you, Icepick. We got Icepick in the house. Isn't Icepick like a famous rapper? Like, I don't know anything about these things, but isn't that like a famous rapper or something? So we've got Icepick, we've got Gene. Thank you, Gene. Really, really appreciate it. I think we're going to get to the first 1,000 really quickly. The challenge is going to be after that. There's Applejack, thank you. But don't forget, you can ask questions. That way, the questions is what's going to make it possible for me to keep talking for 3 hours. So money's great. Questions in some respects with money is even better, with $730 plus minus. And it might be the real Ice Cube. Of course, the real Ice Cube would do a lot more than... No, that was very generous. Noel, thank you. That's very generous. All right, we're closing in on the first $1,000. In the first 7 minutes already, we're very close. That'll be an all-time record. It's going to be, the slog is going to be after that. We'll see how well we do after that. All right, so I wanted to do a review of 2020, and I started to put down just themes of 2020. What was 2020 about? What was the theme? Still too loud, I hear, although some people say it's fine. Thank you, Adam. I'm going to lower it just a tad and see if that'll make it better. All right. I'm not going to play around with it more than that. I'm sorry. It's just that Adam says he's partying with family, but wanted to stop in and support the match. Have a happy new year. Thank you. Really appreciate that. That helps us get to our target. Ragnar of the Desert. What is the painting behind you? Oh, that's a good question, because I'm going to have to turn around to do it, because this is not my space. It's not my space. So the painting behind me is the School of Athens, and I don't know if you can see it. You can see it now. I'll talk a little bit about the School of Athens in a minute. Once I get these down, I'll get these copied down. We'll do a review of 2020, and then we will come back to the questions. Thank you. That's very generous. All right, we've got about, I don't know, we're probably 20% to the 5,000 goal. So you guys are going to have to pony up. But more than that, I think the best way to get to the full match is for you guys to go out there into Facebook and Twitter and try to encourage your friends to come on and make express their support for the show. Come on and listen and share. So the best way to get to where we need to be is not just to wait for people to randomly come on and off, but to actually go and get them. Go and encourage them to come. So I'm not in front of a green screen. Not yet. That is School of Athens. I'm actually in a conference room of the Ayn Rand Institute. So I have to make this big disclaimer. This show, the Iran Book Show, is not a show of the Ayn Rand Institute. The things that I say on the show are my opinions, not the Ayn Rand Institute's. I don't represent the Ayn Rand Institute on the show. This is just me. But today, for a reason I'll tell you in a minute, I don't have any way to do the show. I asked the Institute if I could borrow an office. I got this office. It's pretty cool. We're already over $1,000. That's great. But we have $4,000 still left to go. So something's going to have to give here tonight. Somebody's going to have to write a big check to get us there. All right. What else did I want? Yes. So today's exciting. So some more personal stuff, and then we'll get to summary of 2020. Today's exciting because today is my official day. Well, I guess tomorrow. Let's make tomorrow my official day of breaking ties with California. Today, I vacated my home. I sold it. The money went through. Escrow closed. We today got rid of every last piece of California-based furniture, and either got rid of it, like gave it away or paid somebody to take it, or shipped it to Puerto Rico, which is my new home. So now, officially, unequivocally, my official home was already, Puerto Rico. It's been Puerto Rico for a while now, but now there's no doubt because I don't have a home in California. So I have me and the CEO of Oracle and a bunch of other people have now moved out of California. Elon Musk, Ben Shapiro, there's a lot. There's a real exodus, and I am officially part of that exodus. Daniel, thank you. Really appreciate that. And Nebulsk, sorry, I butchered that. Thank you. It's very generous. All right, we're up to 100, 250 approximately. So we're really getting there. We're getting Californians. We're getting the rational people out of California. And let's hope that somebody learns a lesson from it, because it's not obvious. But today was my last real tie, which was my house to California. My only other tie to California is my son now. And of course, Lena Peikoff is here, whom I saw this afternoon and had a nice time with. But other than that, I have no more ties to California. I've got friends here. I've got business partners here. And I've got a son here, but I really have no other official real estate, financial things that would tie me down to California. It's good. That feels good. I haven't paid California taxes in a while because I've been a resident of Puerto Rico, but now they have nothing on me. Here I am. So, so 2021 is going to be, I hope, a fantastic year. Hope is kind of meaningless, but a fantastic year. And we're going to start it out not being with any connection here. All right. Let's see. Let's talk about 2021. So obviously the lead story of 2021 was COVID. And, it's not even the virus that's the story. The virus isn't the story. Because the virus is a virus. It's a bad virus. It's a bad virus. But this virus is far from the pandemic. It's far from the thing that epidemiologists train for all their lives. It's far from the big one, the thing that has the potential to change civilization, to change our world. This virus was relatively, in the big picture, a mild virus. It's more deadly than the flu. There's no question about that. But in the broader context of life, it's not much deadlier than the flu. It's not very debilitating. Its survival rates are fairly high, particularly for young people. And it could have been handled, and if it had been handled, for example, in Japan, this is not the year of COVID. Nobody cares that much. Yeah, there's some inconvenience. There's been some inconvenience. There's been some hassle. There's been some a little bit of shutdowns of certain things, of certain activities, but overall, it's barely being felt. The same is true in most of Asia, outside of China. COVID, as a virus, is not the story. The story of COVID, is the response to the virus. The story of COVID is the political, cultural response to the virus. Politicians turned this virus into a major catastrophe. They turned something that would have been bad, inconvenient, primarily for older people, deadly for many, into a disaster for all of us, into one of the most horrific events in American history ever. Not because of what the virus did, but because of how a political class and our culture, because you can't not blame in a sense, the people who demanded the political class act the way they did. That is what turned it. The lockdowns, the hysteria, the panic. That is what turned this crisis into a major story and a major disaster. Thank you, Shadowblade. From day one, when I had Amesh Adalja on the show, we've been talking about the fact that this virus needed to be treated like epidemiologists teach us. Viruses should be treated. You test, you trace, you isolate. You maybe protect the particularly vulnerable, and generally you leave people alone. So I think Amesh Adalja coined the term cocooning the elderly. We could have cocooned the elderly, isolated the elderly, and left the majority of Americans alone. Again, we've said this over and over and over again. And yet, nobody really talks about it. Nobody considers this an option. It seems like everything else, that this virus is treated as a political hot potato. There are only two options. You either support lockdowns, and therefore it means you take the virus seriously, or you think the virus is a hoax, and therefore you support no actions, nothing, no testing, no anything. So many Republicans opposed that any kind of budget be allocated towards testing, because testing acknowledges that there's a problem. Like so many things in our world, and you keep seeing this over and over again, and it's continuously stunning, right? You see this over and over and over again, that people can only think in twos. They can only think in two dimensions. You either shut down, or it's a hoax. Binary options are the only way people seem to be able to consider the world. And the truth is, the world is not binary. There are many, many different options. Certainly many, 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 many wrong options. So I'll talk about this, but the theme, I'd say the theme about 2020 for me, and I hope this came across on the shows over the year, but the theme of 2020 for me is people's epistemology is much worse than I thought it was. People's epistemology is much worse than I thought it was. So people's ability to actually think, to think beyond the binary, to think beyond the us versus them, to think beyond the obvious, to think beyond what they're being fed by the particular media they happen to be consuming. That to me is the most scary phenomena of 2020. All right, Alejandra, now you have to figure out what 500 Norwegian krona is in order to add to that amount. But we should be getting very close here to 2,000 and I am busy copying and pasting all these Super Chat questions. And now I know we're going to go 3 hours because just answering all these questions is going to take me forever. If you look at the COVID response, if you look at the election response, if you look at even at the response to BLM, if you look across the board at people's response to, on the right and on the left, to a variety of different cultural phenomena, to a variety of different things, their inability to think about them, their inability to articulate in their own mind, to think about what is actually going on, what are the facts, what do they know versus what don't they know. I think 500 Norwegian krona is more than that, Alejandrina. So it should be, I think, more than 1,600. Maybe I'm wrong. I thought 500 Norwegian. Maybe I'm confusing with a different currency. Maybe somebody can do the math. Oh, it's $50. Okay, then it makes sense. Sorry, my confusion. My error. I think I'm thinking of Australian dollars, which is significantly more. The inability to think about facts, think about what are not facts. Nicholas, thank you. Really appreciate that. To think about what are facts and what are not facts, what reality and what is not reality. Think about what evidence is. Think about what proof is. Think about what you as an individual know versus you and an individual don't know. I'm so disappointed in humanity. Maybe I shouldn't be. I'm so disappointed in people's inability to make those separations. You're seeing that with the election fraud issue. You saw that with COVID all the time. People not getting statistics. People not getting risk. Thank you, Guy. It's been a while. It's great to see you back here. Thank you for being on the chat. Thank you for the support. It was so disappointing to see in people's response to Trump and people's attitude towards Trump, particularly people's attitude towards Trump. And I've known this from day one, but over the last year or so, truly disappointing. And again, from a thinking perspective, and again, I'm not talking about everybody who voted for Trump. I'm talking about specifically about the people who were gaga over Trump, who couldn't imagine anything that Trump could do that they would disagree with, that they thought would be wrong. People who viewed it only as a completely tribal issue. I see it with regard to the vaccines, the irrationality with regard to the vaccines. So I guess when, in the past, I'd say mostly, when I looked at a year and I said, what was the philosophical kind of lesson? I'd say, well, on the negative side, I'd say altruism is alive and well. Altruism is everywhere in the culture. I think this year, and this must have been true, it must be always true, right? Because it's not like 2020 people changed. What became real in 2020 is the extent to which the fundamental problems in the world are epistemological, are problems of thinking, are problems of objectivity, problems of objectivity and ability to think rationally and focus on facts. So to me, that's the big lesson of the year. And even when you think of BLM, right? So the three big stories I think this year were COVID, the elections, and BLM. You think about BLM, you think about critical race theory, defund the police, Antifa. I mean, people were buying into that without thinking. And then later they might have changed their minds because they realized, oh my God, what does this actually imply? But, because somebody was shot unjustifiably, not shot, murdered unjustifiably, killed unjustifiably by the police, because there was a case of police brutality, because the victim happened to be black. The extrapolation from that, on the left, we're all racist. Everybody's a racist. There's systemic racism. The whole world is racist. Not the whole world. The world is fine. It's Americans that are racist. American culture, American society, and it's always been racist. And people just buying into that record. And then going and supporting BLM without doing any kind of research on what they represented and who they were and what they stood for. And there was ultimately a backlash, I think, even on the left against BLM, once people realized that when they were marching, it wasn't just police brutality, it wasn't even just racism. They were marching to do things like defund the police. They were marching to destroy capitalism and bring about socialism. And a lot of people, changed their minds. But again, jumping on a cause, jumping on a bandwagon, jumping to support something without thinking, without evaluating. Racism is bad. Therefore, anybody who puts up a sign saying I'm against racism, everybody jumps on that. Everybody suddenly supports that. Everybody becomes, without thinking, again, without really considering what is going on. All right, before we go on, remember we've got a $250. We've got a $5,000 match today. So if you ever wanted to support the Yaron Brook Show, today's the day. Because for every dollar you contribute via SuperChat, on YouTube, you can go to YouTube to do this. Every dollar you contribute via SuperChat on YouTube is going to be matched dollar for dollar up to $5,000. Up to $5,000. Now, if for some reason you live in Israel or you live overseas and you can't use SuperChat or anything like that, anything you do while the show is going on PayPal, paypal.me, anything you do on paypal.me to Yaron Brook Show, paypal.me/Yaron Brook Show, anything you do there will be matched dollar to dollar up to $5,000, right? $5,000. So if you want to help the show grow, if you want to get us to, thank you, Travis. You want us to help us invest in more marketing, in better production values, on a green screen. That's the plan. The plan is to go to a green screen and to really bump this up. Then, come on board. And today's the day where supporting is doubles your money. Doubles your money. We're getting close to halfway. We're getting close to halfway in less than 30 minutes, which is pretty amazing. If somebody does 250 right now, then we are at halfway within 28 minutes. So that is amazing. That is amazing. Thank you, everybody who's already participated. Thank you for our anonymous donor for the match, and thank you for all of those of you who are about to contribute and get us over that the benchmark, over that to that $5,000 threshold. Now, I have a ton of stuff to say about 2020, but I also have a gazillion questions from the Super Chat. So, don't forget. What we do here is a trade. I do these shows, put them out on YouTube and on the podcast for free. I ask for your support to make all this possible. This year, in particular, 2020 personally, has been, not that you should care, but has been financially difficult because the stuff I do to promote objectivism, which is primarily in the past be out there speaking, that went to basically zero. There was almost no public speaking. I did some online. I can't charge as much, and so revenue plummeted this year, and I did a lot less. Usually I do, on a usual year, I do about 100 public lectures, talks, debates, panels, things like that. The numbers keep shifting here, guys. So about 100 of those every year. This year I did probably 20. So any way you guys can help until we get back to me giving public talks would be. But one of the things I've learned is maybe I shouldn't be giving so many talks. Maybe this is a better way to get the ideas out there. I mean, we've had so much success on the show, and this show has been so productive in terms of revenue and in terms of just getting the word out there and increasing subscribers. I mean, every show is watched often by many more people than I ever get when I speak publicly. So the more money we raise here, the more time I'll spend doing the shows versus running around the world, giving talks. I don't get $4,000 for each talk. I wish. $4,000 is a one-off talk, or $5,000 is a one-off talk. But when I go like to Europe and I give 10 talks in a week, I usually charge a weekly rate to the entity sponsoring me to go there. So that turns out to be more like $2,000 a lecture or something like that. And remember, that includes all my expenses. So I pay my own expenses. So if you invite me to give a talk and you pay me $5,000, I cover my hotel, my airfare, everything, all my expenses, because I don't want to have to deal with, everything else, receipts and billing and all of that. So I prefer to bill it all as a lump sum. Is today my birthday? No, it's not my birthday. And the next birthday is a big one. So I'll let you know when the next birthday is, definitely. So this year, beyond kind of these big stories, for me personally, the thing that stands out this year is A, committed to Puerto Rico, getting out of California. B, no travel. That was very weird. Very little travel. I guess I traveled more than most people, but very little travel for me, regular. No international travel since March or since February. Very strange. The whole thing has been very, very strange. Thank you. All right, we're slowly getting there. Drips and drabs. We're getting closer to halfway mark. Happy pre-birthday, Iran. And this isn't birthday. This is Happy New Year. This is what you're doing now is for a great 2021. We're working here towards a great 2021 and getting that up. Okay. I'm gonna shift now. I'm gonna do some super chat questions because there's so many of them, and I want to make sure we get to all of them. I want to make sure I cover all of them and answer all of them. Of course, we're still $2,661 from our goal. So you guys are still encouraged to get on here. $2 helps. $5 helps. $1,000 would get us there a lot faster. And a couple of $1,000 and we can close shop and more than a couple, but 3 of those would be really nice. But of course, any amount is really, really appreciated. Again, a trade. Thank you, Philip Hopkins. Thank you. That's great. Really appreciate that. All right. So these are some questions from Mika, who gave $200 earlier and sent in 4 questions, each worth $50. I've been studying objectivism, especially Atlas Shrugged, for close to 10 years now. I feel I have a high level of comprehension, but I have raked my brain, and I still can't understand Dagny's statement. When she wakes up in Gold Gulch, she says, "We never had to take any of it seriously, did we? Please help!" Exclamation point. Now, this is the thing. You're not going to find the answer to that. I mean, you have to have the context for the answer to that. You can't just... The statement in and of itself is not what's meaningful, right? Remember, she's crashed, and I don't want to give too much of it away, but she opens her eyes, and there's a description of the face of the man she meets. A description of the face that reflects her entire philosophy of life, her entire view of the world, this is the face of an ideal man. A man who bears no unearned guilt. A man that knows, that has certainty, that understands the world, that has chosen a difficult course, but it has no second thoughts, that is completely integrated and completely at home with himself, at home with his decision, accepting his decisions, all of them. And it just, a perfect man, completely integrated, psychologically completely healthy, no doubts, no guilt, no questions. He's got the answers. And she just looks into his face. And what she sees in that face is the world she always dreamed of. It is the world as she believed it could be when she was a child. This is the world as an ideal. This is the world that now she sees in his face is possible. And what she grasps, in a sense, is that this is possible, and this is what's important. That this is what life's about. Life's not about the challenges, the people chipping away at you. Or put it more broad. Life is not about the irrational. Life is not about the stupidity. Life is not about the arbitrary, right? Life is not about the random. Life is not about all the ridiculous, irrational, evasive people that she is having to deal with in order to run her railroad. What the face she's looking at tells her something much, much, much better. Not even better, it's on a different scale. Like a life of perfection. We talked about perfection when I talked about the virtues. A life of perfection is possible. A life of perfection is attainable. Thank you, John. Thank you, Ian. The life that she's dreamed of since she was a child is possible. And that's when she says, I didn't have to take any of this other stuff seriously, because this is possible. This is attainable. This is somewhere I can live. This is where I can and will and strive to be. With this man, this kind of life, these kind of values. So that is what that statement means. It means that the irrational is impotent. That what is competent, what is good, and what is life-giving is the rational. What is efficacious is the rational. Right? So, again, I'm trying to not give away any spoilers. That is what she means by this, right? And it's in a sense, it's a sense of life response, but it's more than that because it has deep philosophical roots, and the deep philosophical roots basically are perfection is possible, and perfection in morality is what life is about, what the purpose of life is. It's the reason I'm doing what I'm doing. It's the reason I'm alive. And all this other stuff, it's just not that important in the end. Not in the big picture, not in the end, not in terms of the purpose of life. Philip just gave $100 to get Alejandrina's phone number. That's between you and Alejandrina, Philip. That's chutzpah, Philip. That's real chutzpah. All right, we're well over halfway. So as you know, we're going for a $5,000. We've never had anything close to this. This is the biggest match we've ever had by far. We're going for a $5,000 match. We're ready at $2,700 and counting. So we're getting close. We're going to get there, I think. We've got $1,300. No, I can't do math today. What's the matter with me? We've got $2,300 left. $2,300 is a lot of money. So I'm not, I'm still not completely confident. So I'm still waiting for you guys to prove that this is doable, that we can do this match. And I have got enough questions, I think, here to take us through tomorrow morning, take us into the new year. And, I'm going to strive to answer all of them. And I haven't, but keep going, because this is how we're going to make it. Thank you, Colin. If more people listen to your show in 2021, the world will be a better place. That's true. Every additional person that listened to the show, the world becomes a better place. So the world is constantly improving, because the number of subscribers to this show is constantly growing, and we're going to get more subscribers. Okay, let's be clear. This is being done. I know a lot of people joined after I said this. This is being, I'm borrowing an office at the Ayn Rand Institute in order to do this. The show is not the Ayn Rand Institute show. The show is not affiliated. The things I say on the show do not necessarily represent the Ayn Rand Institute. This is just me. It's Yaron Brook. Your support here is not tax deductible. You're not giving to a nonprofit. You're giving it to a for-profit venture called Yaron Brook Show. This money goes to supporting my efforts with regard to the show, whether it's funding, marketing, funding, computers, all the stuff that goes, a new camera, we're going to get a new camera, and all of that. And of course, some income for me. Just to clarify that while this is at the Ayn Rand Institute, not an Ayn Rand Institute program, I just borrowed it because, as I said earlier, I've moved out of my house from California, so I do not have a studio in California. Next week, I will be doing all my shows out of Puerto Rico, San Juan, Puerto Rico. And hopefully I'm buying a new place in Puerto Rico. Once I buy the new place, we will do a green screen. We will do a new studio. We will get everything tip top. And I'm excited. It's going to be we're going to create a fantastic setup once we get the new place. All right, let's see. And I'm actually taking some notes from the setup they have here. This is actually a pretty good setup. I don't know what you think. This is pretty good. I'm looking at a 45-inch screen television in front of me, I could see a setup like this working really nicely, and with a green screen behind me. So we'll do that. All right, back to the questions. Whew, we've got a lot of questions. All right, let's see. We're going back to Mika's question. He says, I'm no philosophy expert, but it seems like people who think they are tend to criticize objectivism on its lack of abstractions. Wow. Too concrete. It seems like a lot of people view philosophy as thinking for the sake of thinking, while Ayn Rand viewed philosophy as thinking for the sake of living. Am I missing something? So first, absolutely. A lot of people do view philosophy for philosophizing, not for living. And Ayn Rand explicitly said her philosophy was a philosophy for living. So there's a philosophy I don't think that is too concrete, is a philosophy where every abstraction is tied to the concrete. Every abstraction is tied to reality, to facts, concretes in reality. So I don't think there's any lack of abstractions in objectivism as compared to any other philosophy. What is different is that objectivism ties them all and makes the point that you don't know anything, that an abstraction without you tying it to reality is meaningless. It's what Ayn Rand called a floating abstraction. It's not tied to anything concrete, anything real. So objectivism is a philosophy tied to reality, to facts. And all the abstractions are tied to facts. So we don't just talk about capitalism as a abstraction, as a theoretical construction, as something detached. We talk about capitalism as a system tied to the lives of people. Tied to the lives of people. Right? So it's about the concrete impact of the political, economic, social system you live under to you as an individual. And it's tied, therefore, to morality, the morality of the individual. And then it's, in a sense, capitalism comes out of the question of, well, what kind of social system would a moral person want to live under? But it's about living. And then the question is, of course, what does morality mean, and what does it mean to be a moral person, and all of that has to be tied also to human experience, to people's lives. So somebody's asking if pride is one of the 7 deadly sins. I did a whole show on that, so you can find that. So, objectivism, yes, much of philosophy out there, I think because of the influence of philosophers like Kant, is about, it deals with abstractions without connecting them to life, without connecting them to reality, without connecting them to the concretes from which they are derived. All right, we're 3,100, guys. This is phenomenal. We did 3,100, or almost 3,100 in less than an hour, and that's amazing, amazing. So we've got $2,000 more to go, and I'm gaining in confidence about our ability to get there. Right? Leonard Peikoff has this amazing course called Objectivism Through Induction. And that's the other thing, that objectivism is an induced philosophy. All new knowledge is achieved through induction. Induction is you start with observation. You start with the facts about reality. And then you abstract a principle that unites them. You abstract an idea that explains them. Oh my God. Skylar is in the house. Yay, Skylar. $500 all at once. Thank you, Skylar. That takes us a long way towards our goal. All right, so now less than $1,500, guys. We've done $1,500 easy in the past. So excellent, excellent, excellent. Skylar, thank you. And Michael keeps flooding me with questions. Is there any way I'm going to get to all of your questions, Michael? We will. I'm certainly going to try. Not if I give long answers like I'm giving these Mika questions, but I'm going to try to get to all these answers. So, all right. So it's not true that objectivism doesn't have enough quote abstractions. It is that the abstractions are tied to reality, and the purpose of the philosophy itself is derived from reality by the process of induction, and philosophy is often viewed as something that is deduced from first principles, something where reality is not the source of knowledge. Right? I mean, certainly Aristotle thought reality was the source of knowledge, but yes. All right, that is a question that would be good to do a show on, and maybe we'll have one of the philosophers on to talk about abstractions and concretes. In watching several Ayn Rand interviews, it occurred to me that the interviewer always made sure to bring up her atheism. With most of these people being from the left, do you think it is possible that they were doing that to undermine her credibility with people from the right, who would be most likely to gravitate towards her views on liberty and capitalism, but also hold religious views. No, I really don't think so. I don't think that was their motivation. I think their motivation was, severalfold. One is they, unfortunately, associated free market views with the right, with conservatives, with people who are religious. And therefore, it was a curiosity for them that she was an atheist, and not just an atheist, you could say a proud atheist. She didn't make a big deal of it, but a proud atheist. Murali, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Thank you. Really appreciate it. So I think to them it was surprising and interesting. I also think that a lot of people on the left are religious. They just don't take the religion too seriously. I think it's a mistake to think that everybody on the left is an atheist. If you consider everybody who voted to the Democratic Party an atheist, a leftist, then that's 50% of the population. Let's say only 30% of them consider themselves leftist. Are 30% of the American population atheists? No. They might believe in Buddha, or they might believe in New Age, or they might believe in who knows what. To them, it's still unusual and strange for somebody to be an atheist, to be out there as an atheist, and to have an articulate philosophy, and then, on top of that, to be pro-capitalist. So I think all of that combination was really interesting and curious for them, and therefore they asked the question. So I really don't give them any kind of dubious, scheming, conspiratorial motives for asking that question. All right, I'm going to have to give shorter shorter answers. Is there ever a rational reason for foreign aid? Seems like most corruption and cronyism. Do you think there is a chance that the spotlight that was put on it recently would deter it in the future? Seems like people across the political spectrum are disgusted by it. No, well, the only rational reason for foreign aid is aid focused on self-defense. That is, let's say you share a common enemy with another country, and that other country has the capacity to deal with that enemy more effectively, or can provide you with intelligence, or can provide you with research and development, weapons development, so on. Then payment for those services, which you could view as foreign aid, is justified. You also, during a war, for example, let's say during World War II, America hadn't joined the war yet. Britain was fighting the Nazis. The idea would be you might want to provide the British with foreign aid, with aid in their efforts against the Nazis, so that if you landed up joining the war, the Nazis would be weaker. Or, Andrew, thank you. So weaken the enemy, and also just because you want the enemy beaten, and since you're not in the war, your proxy is the British, and they're fighting the war for you. But the idea is you're only doing it to protect the lives and property of American citizens, right? So it's focused on, it still does not represent an expansion of the principle. And the principle is that the United States government should only spend money protecting the lives and property of Americans, right? Individual rights, right? That's the only job of government. So it has to be within that context. Now, for example, and I know some people would be shocked by this, I'm an opponent of all foreign aid that is not security related, including, and maybe most definitely, the biggest recipient of American foreign aid. And the biggest recipient of American foreign aid is Israel. I think it's a travesty that the United States gives so much money to Israel. Now, I think some money in exchange for weapons development, in exchange for intelligence, in exchange for fighting a common enemy is justified. But certainly nothing justifies the massive amount of aid that is provided to Israel for economic purposes just as a thing. Now, Egypt is the second largest recipient of American foreign aid. There's no security reason to give Egypt the money. So I believe none of these countries should get any foreign aid. As Riley says in the comments, Israel would be stronger without American aid. More self-reliant. It would have less of a welfare state because America funds the Israeli welfare state. If America cut them off, they would have to replace that money somehow. And the best way to replace that money is to shrink government spending. And that would be good for Israel. But more importantly, it's good for America. Why should you, any of you, and me, subsidize the Israeli welfare state? So absolutely, I believe the foreign aid is immoral, irrational, and should stop. Will the current brouhaha over foreign aid change that? No, 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 no. There's no incentive. Politicians love foreign aid. They get to visit lots of these countries. They get to hand out checks. They get to get consulting gigs after they leave Congress. They love the foreign stuff. Right? So no, there's no chance that the United States is going to stop the foreign aid. I mean, I'll give you one example that really was pretty, I don't think anybody noticed it. But as part of Morocco's agreement to, quote, normalize relations with Israel, even though they've been, Israelis have been visiting Morocco for years now. My wife's mother was born in Morocco. And her mother went back to visit Morocco a few years ago. So Israelis have been welcoming Morocco for a long time. But in exchange for them normalizing relations with Israel, the United States agreed, the Trump administration agreed, to recognize the Moroccan claim on the Western Sahara. There's some tribe in the Western Sahara that claims that the Western Sahara is theirs, and they don't want Morocco involved. They don't want to be under Morocco rule. They want to be independent of Morocco. Western Sahara, there's literally nothing there except desert. A bunch of senators and congressmen came out and said, oh, no, we mustn't upset Western Sahara. And it's like, why do you care? Like, what's going on? How much have they paid you? What are the goodies you're getting? Why do you care about Western Sahara? And it might be that they've got a future consulting gig there. It might be that the people of Western Sahara invited them over and they schmoozed with them and they really like the people. It might be a lot of things. But it has nothing to do with American individual rights of Americans. It has nothing to do with anything. One of Freeman says Morocco invaded Spanish Western Sahara. I mean, I'm sorry, but who cares? I mean, it's not like Spanish Western Sahara was a capitalist haven, free market like Hong Kong or something, that we should care because the Moroccans invaded it. Right? So, because all these politicians have stuff, have relationships, have all kinds of incentives for whatever reason to be engaged with these countries. And that's not going to go away. They like it. It's fun. It's just not going to go away. All right, I need to do something here. One second. All right, done. The setup is a little. All right, we're at $3,788. $3,788, which means we need. All right, we got $2. All right, so we're $3,800. So that. Thank you, Jonathan, for making my math easier. No, it's 880. 3,780. Oh, 88. Jesus, man, I can't even read. Never mind, do math. 3,790. So we need $1,210. $1,210 is would get us where we need to go. Oh, now we've got an adjustment. Okay, I'm giving up. I can't follow this. So I don't think foreign aid is going for a variety of reasons, some of which are articulated here, but there are lots of others. It's basically a source for massive corruption for American politicians, and they're not going to voluntarily give it up. Not without for example, a president or a political, intellectual, cultural movement that demands that it be given up. And we don't have that, right? You've got Rand Paul and you've got a few congressmen that pretended to be really upset by the foreign aid. The other issue is it's tiny as compared to all the other garbage our politicians spend their money on, right? Thank you, Jonathan, and I appreciate that. And we're going to have many more years to go. So we're just getting rolling here, right? Oh, I did my physical. I did this. Okay, so let's take a break for a second, and I'll tell you a personal story. So two personal stories, because the next thing. So I told you that I'm doing this thing where you get a full. The Bay loves me. All right, I'm not sure who the Bay is. Is that the Bay Area? Javier, thank you, Javier. That is very generous. Anyway, they do a whole body MRI. They do an MRI of your brain. They do an MRI of your heart. They do MRI of the organs, stomach, all the organs. They do an analysis of fat and muscle. They do a scan for calcification. They do an echocardiogram. Thank you, Deborah. That's very generous. Thank you. They do an echocardiogram. They take blood and they do every test imaginable, including they do a genetic analysis. So the guy who founded this company is the first guy, Greg Venetier, who ever sequenced the human genome. He was the guy who sequenced the human genome, right? So they use this all to the Bay Area. I'm glad there's people in the Bay Area love me. I love the Bay Area in spite of the problems in the Bay Area. I love the Bay Area. I love the people in the Bay Area. I love the energy of the Bay Area. I love the productivity of the Bay Area. Anyway, they do your genetic, your productivity for particular diseases. They do all these tests. You go in and you spend, I spent 6 hours there and they did all these tests. And so I want to share the good news with you. I don't have all the news yet. Bree, wow, thank you. There we go, getting us closer to our target. So the good news is that from what they told me, the likelihood, so first, I don't have cancer. That's a good thing. So they scanned everything. They looked for everything, no growths, nothing there. It looks like I don't have cancer. Second, it looks like my heart is great. So basically, the doctor said, you're not going to get a heart attack in the next 5 years and probably the next 10 years. So I'm going to be around for a while, guys. So I'm not going anywhere. I'm getting older, but it looks like I'm pretty healthy. So if not for my back, I would say I'm healthy. So that's great. That was a great New Year's end of 2020 message. Now, this group, for those of you interested, I highly recommend it. I haven't done I haven't got the blood work yet. I haven't got the genetic stuff yet, but I got everything else. It costs a lot of money, but there will be, and I'll be announcing this next year, there will be a Iran Book Show discount for anybody who goes. But we're talking about in excess of $10,000 a year to do this on an annual basis. But you get doctors, you get unbelievable equipment, you get concierge service. It's truly amazing. But it's called Health Nucleus. Health Nucleus. Look them up. Health Nucleus. They're in San Diego, La Jolla. They are about to open up a branch in South San Francisco. I recommend it. MRI, full body MRI is definitely worth doing, partially because there's no radiation, right? MRI doesn't create any radiation, so you can do it safely. You can do it every year. You can get a benchmark. You can know what everything is happening, what's going on, if changes from year to year happen. If you get cancer, you catch it very, very early, right? You catch it within a year. Health, not human, Health Nucleus, Health Nucleus. If you do it, if you decide to call them up or send them an email, tell them you heard about it on the Iran Book Show. They're not yet sponsors, although I should ask them that my checkup be free, so in exchange for my sponsorship. But let's see how many of you sign up. If enough of you sign up, I'll ask for that. Anyway, call them, read up about them, see if you like them, and they will give you a discount since I have referred you to them. So there you go. We're at $4,081, less than $1,000, and we've only been going at this for about an hour and 5 minutes. That is spectacular. Thank you. Okay, is the hitchhiking story. So the question was perhaps some crazy hitchhiking story or military story to end the year. So, I can't remember which hitchhiking stories I've told you. So it's, I'm not completely, maybe somebody can make a list of all the hitchhiking stories I've told you, and I can tell you other hitchhiking stories. But here's a hiking story, not a hitchhiking story, but a hiking story. I did do a lot of hitchhiking. Oh, Zvika, thank you. Zvika, another friend from the Bay Area. But Zvika is my oldest friend. I think that's right. I think Zvika is my oldest friend. I've known Zvika for, it's not quite 40 years, but maybe it is. It's getting very close to 40 years if it's not 40 years. And that dates me and it dates Zvika. So we're both getting old. So let's see. I'm hiking. I don't know if Zvika knows this story. I'm hiking in the Golan Heights. Actually, this is in Israel with a friend of mine. This friend of mine and I would regularly go hiking in the Golan Heights, or all over Israel. We hiked in the desert. The two of us would just, on any given weekend, we would go out there, hitchhike, get to where we wanted to hike, and go hiking. And we're walking along this, what we thought was a trail, and at the base of we haven't gone up the mountain. The Golan Heights is up high. We're going up the mountain, and this is probably 1978. This is 1978. And I'm probably 16 or 17 years old, something like that. And we suddenly notice a fence in a slight distance, but a fence. And what's scary about this fence is we're looking at a beware minefield. Beware, for some reason, Ragnar of the Desert doesn't let you do the HTTP. So the website is www.healthnucleus100plus.com. Healthnucleus100plus.com. That is the website. And again, if you approach them, tell them you heard about it on the Iran Book Show. That'd be fantastic. And let me know that you did that. Anyway, we look at this fence, and there's a sign, and we can tell it's one of those landmine signs, but we're looking at it from the back. We're looking at it from the back. Now, in the beginning, we thought, no, that can't be. So we walk and we get closer, and no, there's just no question. We are looking at a beware landmine, which you used to see in those days all over the Golan Heights, because there was still a lot of mines there. Beware landmine sign from the back of it. Now, that suggests that we are walking in a landmine field, in a field of landmines. And we stop and we froze. And I don't know that I've ever been as afraid as I was that minute. So we decided that we would take turns leading, and we would walk in each other's footsteps. And so we did that for about half an hour. And the path got us closer and closer to this fence. And for half an hour, we walked slowly in each other's footsteps. I would lead, then he would lead. Scared, you can imagine. Any step you take would blow your leg off or blow kill you completely. And as we got close to the fence, we discovered, right? We discovered that we weren't in a landmine field. What we had seen was indeed a beware landmine sign from the back. But what had happened was that there were two fences, and the landmines were between the fences. And we had seen the outer fence from the back. But the landmines were in between the two fences. We were not in danger. But you can imagine what it's like, or maybe you can't, or maybe you can, I don't know, but what it's like for about a half an hour to think that you're in the landmine field. Now, yeah, I mean, and that's kind of story you only have in Israel. Well, in other places where the landmines are real, and like Cambodia and places like that, where people get where there are no signs, they just are landmines. So that's for real. That's life to some extent, life in Israel, life if you're a hiker and you go out there in Israel. So that's my landmine story. That's my landmine story. Emmanuel is asking where I am. I'm borrowing an office from the Ayn Rand Institute, and I'm doing the show from the Ayn Rand Institute. My home in California has been sold, gone, cleaned out, no space to do it there. So I asked the Institute if I could borrow an office. Saying that, I want to emphasize that this is not an Ayn Rand Institute show. The opinions I have on the show do not represent the Ayn Rand Institute. This is a personal show. These are personal opinions, and so on. All right. That, and of course, if you're interested in more hitchhiking stories, like crossing the United States by hitchhiking, which I did, or hitchhiking stories in Israel, or other kind of crazy stories, you're welcome to ask. I don't really know or think that you guys are interested. JDS, thank you. You're getting us very, very close to the target. That should put us we're about $500 away. So that's exciting. Okay, now I'm going to go through these things fast. Do you know a great school that rivals Van Damme Academy? It's looking like we will have an opportunity to leave California, but we have been unsuccessful in finding an alternative to VDA. You might want to look at Higher Ground Education. They have some great schools. I don't know exactly where they are. I can't directly vouch for the quality, but I know a lot of people at Higher Ground Education, and I'm sure you'd get a good product if you talk about education as a product. But if you could find one of their schools, so that would be my recommendation. Okay, you once said you find it hard to figure out what it means to live healthily when it comes to nutrition. What's your current stance on the issue? Happy New Year from Austria. I mean, I still find it difficult. I have been under the same nutritional regime for about, 15 years? Jesus Christ, the number of questions is astounding. I'm going to be here all night. But given that you're about to make it to 5,000 with a match, that's 10,000. Not a bad days of work. $10,000 for answering a lot of questions. So I'm pretty happy. So I've been on what at that time was called a South Beach diet. Then was a little bit like, but not exactly like paleo, and today is a little bit like keto, but not really keto. So I don't eat. I try to avoid it, and I don't do this 100%, but I try to avoid simple carbs, basically. So I tend not to eat bread, cookies, any sugary anything, other than fruits or sugar in food. I try to avoid pasta. I try to avoid Ken. Thank you. Thank you. And I don't think we need mandatory. You could still get it without mandatory. They just need to do it on scale. Anyway, we'll answer that when we get to it. So that's basically what I do. I eat a lot of fish. So I try to get my omega 3s. I do some. Obviously, I exercise. Probably not as much as I should. But I still find the whole food thing confusing and contradictory, and new information keeps coming out, and so on. Now I have a new doctor. We'll see what she thinks about the appropriate neutrality. Okay. What is the painting behind me? That's School of Athens. The amazing thing about School of Athens is the characters portrayed in School of Athens. So you've got Aristotle and Plato right in the center. Plato is pointing up to the heavens, to the world of forms. Aristotle is pointing forward to the world as it is, right? To the world as it is. But you've got a bunch of different everybody there is somebody, right? So, for example, one of the characters at the bottom portraying, they're all Greek philosophers. And so there's a portrait of Michelangelo in there. This was done by Raphael, who was a contemporary of Michelangelo. And Raphael is in the portrait. He did a self-portrait of himself in there. So if you get a little map of all the different figures portrayed in it, it's quite astounding. And it's a positive portrayal of study, philosophy, and kind of different attitudes and different schools of philosophy. So it's a magnificent painting, one of the great masterpieces of all time. And it is in Italy, I think in Milan, but I might be wrong. I think it's in Milan, but it might be Rome. Definitely worth seeing it, but this is it. All right, Troy put us over the top. I mean, Troy has actually put us over the top, for the whole year. Troy has been amazing for the Iran Book Show. Thank you, Troy. Troy has, I think he put us over the top. Troy's sponsored a number of different shows. Of course, Troy sponsored the series on the objectivist ethics. All right, anonymous supporter, we did it. Thank you. Thank you. This has been terrific. Thank you all, guys. I'm not going anywhere because I have to answer all these questions now. So how about this, guys? I love you, and this is great, but no more questions. You want to contribute? That's great. You want to use the Super Chat to contribute? That's great, but no more questions because I need to get through these questions, and there's enough here to keep me for 3 hours. So Jonathan is probably going to get his wish. That is amazing. We did it in an hour and 16 minutes. Who said that they're not in? They're not enough. They're not a lot of supporters of the show, or not enough, or not passionate enough. You guys are fantastic, truly fantastic, passionate, engaged people. It's always, this is a lot of fun for me, and this is why I love doing it live. I love doing it live because I get to watch you commenting. I love doing it live so I can answer your questions. I love doing it live so we can do these telethons. Now, I know that some people don't like the telethons, particularly the podcast, the people who listen to this afterwards on by podcast don't necessarily love this, but it's fun. So just enjoy it. Yeah, it's not that intellectual, and yeah, I'm asking for money, but I'm an objectivist. I don't have any problem asking for money as long as I'm providing what I believe is value worthy of the money. So those of you who don't like it, don't listen to these shows. I mark them as matching shows, but this is fantastic. Thank you. But here's my request for now: no more questions. Money's fine, but no more questions. Some of you love the telethons, I know, and the telethons can be fun. And really, I think Derek did Derek get us going with the telethons? Maybe it was Derek. Maybe Derek. Derek, thank you. I think it was you. If not, that's okay too. But thank you for getting us really going. You were the guy who really got us on Super Chat. You really pushed Super Chat and got it going. And now we keep going. But I believe you've been to Norway. Did you try some traditional Norwegian cuisine? If so, what was it and what did you think of it? I did try some Norwegian fish thing. I did not like it. I don't remember what it was. It was strange. And they warned me. The people I was with warned me not, but I said I have to try, and I didn't really like it. But I'm looking forward to coming back to Norway, maybe this summer, and trying some of your high-end restaurants, new Scandinavian cuisine. I'm a big fan of new Scandinavian cuisine, so I want to do a foodie road trip through Scandinavia with my wife. I'm planning to do that in the summer, if the gods will allow it, or the gods in Brussels will allow it. Daniel, thank you. Thank you. That's very generous. Really appreciate all the support. Thank you, guys. So I'll have more to say about Norwegian cuisine in the future, hopefully more positive. All right. Consciousness is God. Religion is psychology. I am God. So are you. You just don't know it. I don't know what that means. It empties the concept of God from all content. if you say that you are God. I mean, you are you. You don't have, God is omniscient and omnipotent, and you are not omniscient and omnipotent. God is pure consciousness, and you're not pure consciousness. There are lots of things it's meaningless. The definition has no meaning. No meaning. All right, we're closing on a 5,500, guys. This is amazing. Trickle-down economics is back. They compared Reagan tax cuts to other countries that didn't cut taxes. They extrapolate tax cuts didn't work. No regulations or other interventions mentioned. Do you have anything to say about trickle-down economics? Well, people don't understand what trickle-down economics is. All wealth is trickle-down. Indeed, I've said before, it's not a trickle. It's a flood. A flood. A massive flood. Right? Because where does wealth come from? Wealth comes from entrepreneurs. Wealth comes from innovation. Wealth comes from production. So wealth is created. Wealth is created by specific people, by entrepreneurs, innovators, businessmen. That's who creates wealth. Everything we have is from them. Trickle down, flooded down. Try, there's no labor without entrepreneurs and without capitalists. What would they do? What would they build? What would they think of? So, there is no, it's so ridiculous. It comes from the labor theory of value that says that all value is created by your hands, through material effort. But that's just false. Wealth is a creation of the human mind. So all wealth is trickled down from the men of the mind to everybody else. Where would you have a job if not for the entrepreneur that created the company, and the other entrepreneurs that created the other companies? And the legal system, and the capitalists who funded those companies, the capitalists who allocate capital towards your companies. That's where, so if you free up more capital to create more companies, the problem with Reagan is that while he cut taxes, he didn't cut regulation. He didn't cut spending. So the spending was still high. The spending, the amount of money the government sucks out of the private economy, was still too high. And in that sense, he didn't free up enough capital to be trickled down. But trickle-down economics is self-evidently trickle down. Flood down, sorry, it's not trickle down. It is of course right. Because again, the source of wealth. The source of wealth is the mind. The source of wealth is entrepreneurs. The source of wealth are the capitalists. The source of wealth are the businessmen. Okay. Is it not obvious when your thinking is irrational? I wouldn't say obvious, but I think you typically know when you're not being rational. If you're mostly rational. But I think that people who are not rational regularly as a habit can't tell the difference really. To them it's all, they come to conclusions some vague way, they're not even sure how it is. So you have to know what you're doing to be aware of what is rational and what is irrational. You have to know what rationality is, and you have to engage in the activity of being rational. So, it's not obvious to everybody that they're irrational because they don't have what to compare it to. Everything is just there. Everything is the same. Because even when they happen to be rational, they might be in a moment of focus, but if they could really differentiate between that, maybe they'd stick to the moment of focus, but it doesn't really stand out. Maybe, I don't have the experience. Maybe people who are irrational and then have moments of focus know when they have their moments of focus. I don't know, but my guess is that everything is just a blur to them. What's the difference between something personal and something being subjective? Subjective means it's has no referent in reality for you. It's just what you feel like. It's just because. Being personal can be objective. It's this is right for me. I understand why why this particular I love my wife. You guys don't love my wife. Am I being subjective? No. I can identify the particular qualities about my wife that I love. That's personal. You wouldn't love my wife necessarily, but I do. But it's objective because I've identified the particular characteristics, the reasons why I love her, and why I wouldn't love her if she didn't embody these characteristics. So that's personal. Personal is objective, but not universal. Right? Objective, but not universal. So, subjective implies that there is no objectivity to it, that it doesn't have reasons, that it is not based on something objective in reality, something real in reality. It's not, it's not rational, right? It's just whatever. I'd like to think we're anti-fragile, Nassim Taleb's concept, and therefore that most of us who get through this pandemic will come out stronger in some way than we would have otherwise thought. I don't know who we is, right? Some of us are anti-fragile, but not everybody is, and I'm not sure the culture is, and I'm not sure our political system is. Our political system seems to be unraveling before our eyes, and I think that COVID has enhanced, has accelerated that and made that more, more real. And well, it's exaggerated. It's blown it up. And I don't know that our political system can escape, is anti-fragile. So the authoritarianism that governors have learned that they can get away with during COVID, is that just going to go away? What is the lesson learned from COVID? Is it not? Raymond, thank you. That is very generous. Really appreciate that. Is the lesson learned from COVID not that we can get away with authoritarian stuff and people will accept it and roll with it? So I don't think as a culture, as a political system, we are anti-fragile. That is that we cope very well with crises. Indeed, the evidence suggests that it's the opposite. That after World War II, the government never went back to the size of it was way before that. After the Great Recession, after the war in Iraq, is our privacy ever going to go back to pre-Patriot Act days? Probably not. Thank you for the match and everything else. So crises are usually an excuse to expand government, expand control, expand authoritarianism. And until we actually change the culture, I don't see how that goes away. So I think we're very fragile. Any view on the claims of election fraud in Nixon versus Kennedy, and were they different than Trump's claim? I mean, I don't know. From what I understand, and I don't have knowledge here, again, think about knowledge, the claims of election fraud in Nixon versus of Kennedy were well substantiated and had real validity and legitimacy. But I don't know that. I just suspect that. And I don't know if they're different. I haven't seen. The difference is this. The Nixon versus Kennedy claims never made it to court. The Nixon versus Kennedy claims never had the opportunity to be aired on television, to be discussed, to be debated. And for what I've seen, granted, I haven't seen everything, but at least in the courts, these claims about the Trump claims are being aired, and they've been found everywhere, and pretty stridently being found lacking by courts with sympathy to Trump. That is, courts of judges appointed by Trump. Courts of judges who are Republicans have almost all, I mean, I think all of them basically said, there's nothing here. Why do you even bring this to us? Or you guys should be, this is ridiculous that you're bringing this to us because there's nothing here. And what are you actually arguing for? I mean, we don't need legal reform because they didn't do what you wanted them to do. We have a legal system that is probably, of the three branches of government, the best of the three, particularly when you get outside of constitutional issues, and these are not constitutional issues. If there was fraud, the courts would have found it. If there were fraud, then Trump's lawyers would have argued that there was fraud. But in many of these cases, they didn't even argue fraud. They argued all kinds of other technicalities. So no, I don't think there's any legitimacy. Now, I'm not saying there was no fraud. I think there's fraud in every election. The question is of magnitude. Now, Nixon, Kennedy, the argument was Chicago, Illinois, Daley and the machine. Here, the argument is like 5 states. There's just no evidence of that. Now, is there a case here, a case there? Did people misbehave? Did people do things they weren't supposed to do? Sure. On the Republican side as well, by the way. If you actually listen to a wide variety of news sources, you will find complaints about Republicans restricting access to voting to certain people as well. So there are claims on both sides. There's nothing systemic here. There's nothing that would overturn this election. I wanted to thank you. Oh, Derek writes, I want to thank you for helping me make my 2020 so successful. You're on. Miss you guys. I will listen to audio version a lot. Rational New Year. He still listens to audio version, even if though he's not here much on SuperChat anymore. Great. I mean, the idea that Biden stole this election would suggest that Democrats, and Biden in particular, are super efficacious, super efficient, super able to hide these kind of things, super good at what they do. Really? These are the Democrats we're talking about. These are politicians we're talking about. These are political activists we're talking about. They're so good that even though, for example, a state like Georgia, which is 100% run by Republicans, even in Georgia, they managed to bamboozle the entire Republican. They're so good at this. They're just amazing. I mean, really, politicians barely can tie their own shoelaces. Today, none of them can. They probably use Velcro. The idea that they could orchestrate, this is the problem with conspiracy theories often, is that you'd have to be a freaking genius to do the conspiracy. And by definition, the people we're talking about are not. Biden didn't steal the nomination from Sanders. You can make the argument that Clinton did, but Biden trounced Sanders because the Democratic Party is not where Bernie Sanders is. They're not. As much as you guys would like the Democrats to be the devil you believe they are not. I mean, they're bad. They're really, really bad. But they're just not as evil as you think they are. Or competent as you think they are. Have you ever had a falling out with someone that reconnected years later? I'm sure I did. Nothing comes to mind right now. Nothing comes to mind right now. Sorry. I know someone in the financial sector who said that banks were indeed too big to fail and that it was necessary to bail them out to protect the economy. Can you explain this reasoning and give your response? I mean, that's a long, you'd have to get into a lot of detail. But the reasoning is that banks at the heart of the financial system, and the financial system is at the heart of the economy. That is, without new capital, without loans, the economy grounds to a halt. Without a proper allocation of capital, then capital goes to bad uses and the economy grounds to a halt. If banks go under, as banks have gone under in pre-Great Depression and in the teens, in a mixed economy like ours, a number of things happen. One, banks stop giving out loans. Two, there's a run on the banks, which forces the FDIC, the Federal Reserve, to try to bail out everybody left and right, which could create havoc in financial markets. So banks and financial institutions at the heart, at the core of the world of finance. And the world of finance is at the heart and the core of the economy. So if the economy is going to be healthy, the core, the heart, needs to be healthy. Finance and banks need to be healthy. Now, in a mixed economy, where the view is that government bailouts have no cost, that there is no, you can print money and there's no problem with that, then yeah, they argue that, look, we bail out the banks and everything returns to normal and everything's fine. But that's not what happens. You bail out the banks and there are other consequences elsewhere in the economy, for example, really slow economic growth or inflation or a variety of different possible outcomes, negative outcomes, that are far more painful and deadly than the original outcome of just letting the banks fail. But you don't feel them immediately. It stretches them over time. It stretches the pain over time. So nobody actually rebels against the bailouts because the price you pay for the bailouts gets stretched over many, many years, many, many decades, for example. In a laissez-faire capitalist economy, there wouldn't be banks going under. There wouldn't be the systemic risk of all banks collapsing like there is in a mixed economy where the government is involved and particularly where the Federal Reserve is involved. Systemic risk, the risk that an entire system will collapse, the fragility and the infragility of I forget his name now, Talib Nassim, is government. Government is the fragile thing. Government is the systemic risk. Government, whether it's through government policies, regulations, controls, or whether it's through the Federal Reserve. But it is government that creates these situations where we would have a banking collapse. Banks don't collapse if government doesn't create an environment friendly for the governments to, that incentivizes banks to collapse. Private banks, yeah, a private bank might go bankrupt, another private bank might go bankrupt, a region might hurt, but to get a nationwide collapse in the banking sector, a nationwide collapse in finance, is just not going to happen in a true free market, but is going to happen when the government ties all these markets together. All right. Nassim Talib. I know someone that's a financial sector. Happy New Year, Ron. Congratulations on the move. This was a tough year for me, but your show was a big help. Thank you. Looking forward to the future. Thank you. I'm glad the show is a help. That encourages me to know that. Derek asks, is Die Hard objectively a Christmas movie? No, I don't think so. It doesn't have a Christmassy theme, and it just happens to be at a Christmas party, but who cares? And the Christmas party could be before Christmas, after Christmas. That has nothing to do with Christmas, with the benevolence of Christmas, the gift giving of Christmas, the friends and family atmosphere of Christmas. So no, it's not. I don't know why I answered that question. Out of line. Derek, stop distracting me. Is there a meaning to life? Yes. The meaning to life is what you give it. There's no meaning to life out there to be found and to be sought. The meaning to life is a question of, is there a meaning to your life? And I'd say for most of us, the meaning of our life is our career. The meaning to our life is what we do. And the meaning of my life is this. This is what gives me meaning. This is what gives me meaning. Happy New Year, Room. So your career is your central purpose. And that central purpose is what gives your life much of it meaning. But the meaning of your life is your life. It is to live it. It doesn't have a meaning in the sense that people like Jordan Peterson talk about it. Something out there, something that comes from the outside. Do you need a God for that or something? No. The meaning comes from inside. The meaning of my life is my happiness, my success, my ability to do this. This is my meaning. This is why do I live? I live to do this. I live to be happy. I live to be happy, and you should live to be happy. Okay, we're going to close on a 2021 little motivational talk, but we're not anywhere close to closing. Oh my God. Oh my God. All right, we'll keep going. We'll see if we can do this. If I'm trying to sell my house and my neighbor wants to paint his house bright pink with polka dots and it dramatically lowers the value of my house, does my neighbor have a right to do that? Yes. Yes. Unless you have some covenant in the association in which you live that restricts his ability to do that. But covenants like that, they're contracts. And contracts have to have a life to them. So it has to abide by a contract. But yes, suddenly you can, there can be neighborhood agreements. But outside of the neighborhood, no. No. Oh, I'm sorry. Derek made a statement. It wasn't a question. It took me a while to figure that out. Okay, we'll schedule a debate between me and Derek about whether Die Hard is a Christmas movie. The virus is real, deadly to some, and this is a manufactured crisis. Both can be true. Yes. Suddenly, it's not just a manufactured crisis. It's not just telling it there's a crisis and there isn't one. Because there is a crisis right now. For example, emergency rooms in Southern California are pretty full. But the crisis, we didn't have to have a crisis. If we behaved appropriately, if we were led, if we had a leader, if we got objective information, then there would be no crisis. The crisis is manufactured because it was avoidable. And the fact that they didn't avoid it, they made it. And now we really have a crisis. And again, they're not dealing with the crisis right, so we're likely to have more crises. Because of easy government loans, college prices have skyrocketed. Since there is also a shortage of students that colleges are fighting over, why don't market forces drive college prices down to a more reasonable level? Because the top colleges are not fighting over students. The fact is there's no shortage of students for the very expensive universities. The very expensive universities are very selective. They have a huge number of applications. The lower you go down, the lower the price because they're less competitive. So the market is working. Now, it is true that some universities, they can keep the price high. They get less supply. They get less students. But there's still enough because they have, I guess, such high profit margins at those levels, to pay the professors and everybody else and stuff. So there's not an actual competition going on because the states still fund these universities. They're regulated by the state. And, of course, these student loans are distorted. But if there was a shortage of students, either colleges would close, and some have, I think as partially as a result of this, or prices would come down. But as far as I know, where prices are high, there's no shortage of students. There's no shortage of students at Harvard or even at the University of Texas. They could take in quadruple the number, if not more, of the people willing to pay their price. Everybody's willing to pay the price because the student loans are given to anybody. Do you think a lot of objectivist intellectuals underestimate the power of the Enlightenment to continue human progress despite the forces of statism? Yes. Yes, I think that's right. I think it's subtle. The forces of good in our culture, non-objectives, the forces of good in our culture are subtle. And they're in spite of the philosophy and the remnants of the Enlightenment. And they are powerful. But it's hard to see them and hard to appreciate their full magnitude. Any chance to get John Allison to talk about management and objective values in manufacturing with labor laws? The value of justice, pride, productivity are difficult to act on with regulations. I will try to get John Allison on the show, and then you can ask him a question about that. How about that? If the interests of rational men don't clash, why do objectivists clash so much? It's a good question. Maybe we're not always being rational. Some of us. So the implication is that we're rational. Maybe some of us are not. And we don't clash that much. I mean, I get this often. Why do objectivists fight all the time? We don't. Most of us don't fight most of the time. So I just don't, you just focus on the fights. And they get a lot of press, but for every clash, there's a million interactions that are great. And people ignore that. Again, it's what do you focus on? What are you focused on? Right? So, no, I mean, I don't focus on the negative in that sense, on the clashes. The clashes are trivial, relatively speaking, right? And there's so much good that happens. There's so much good interaction between objectivist intellectuals and objectivists generally. Not all objectivists are rational. All the time. I mean, we're all striving to be morally perfect. Not all of us attain that. What if Rourke had a similar philosophy to what Dominique initially had, and he agreed to escape and live the modest life that she offered him? What would have happened to their psychologist philosophies over time? Oh, they would have been crushed. They would have been, they would have been miserable. I mean, Rourke is a giant of productivity, and if he's not, he can't be productive. Because any field he enters, he's going to be excellent. Right? Joe says something good. Having your interests clash and clashing ideologically on the intellectual matters is different. Yes, it can be different, but the fundamental interests don't clash, right? So I disagree with certain people, let's say, about the strategy of ARI. But we're all think that the governance of ARI should continue based on its governance. We all think that we should in a free society, we should all live in a free society, and we shouldn't be forced, and in spite of the fact that we don't agree on something, we don't come to fist fights. So it's true that not every disagreement is a clash of interests. That is true. Thank you, Joe. It's true that not every disagreement is a clash of interests. But it's also true that we're not always all rational or moral. And that has to be recognized. Don't assume if somebody's an objectivist that they're rational or moral. Always. 100% of the time. They might not be. So going back to the Rourke-Dominique question, I think there would be shadows of what they could. They would never be happy. Never be happy. Notice that in Galt's Gulch, they all do productive work. They all excel. They all trade. Thank you, Mr. Hatton Clogs. Appreciate it. And yes, relatives are always disheartening. I just saw a video clip from absolutely empty streets in the middle of the city in Germany with the caption, "This is what proper lockdowns look like." All I could think was, yes, let's be obedient to the state and follow those orders like the Germans. I think actually, I sympathize with that, with what you just said. But what's interesting is you're seeing demonstrations in Germany. Germany is one of the countries where there are demonstrations, where people are objecting. So good for the Germans for standing up against the lockdowns, at least to some extent. So, I won't give up on Germany completely. Although, I do sympathize with let's all be Germans, follow orders, and so on. Right? Hopefully, there's a new generation of Germans who are not, just order followers. Is COVID good in a way because it's the only thing that got Trump out of office? Without these lockdowns, I'm pretty sure Trump would have won in a landslide. No, I don't think Trump would have won in a landslide no matter what. I think he might have won, but his popularity didn't budge his entire term. I've never seen. I don't think there's a precedent for a president who's in terms of popularity, in terms of do you like the president in polls, has held constant at 42%. Never went above that. Now, a bunch of people would have voted for him who don't like him, and that would have allowed him to win. But he wouldn't have won in a landslide. And I don't think he would have won the popular vote because I don't think he was liked. I don't think COVID, I don't wish COVID on everybody, even if this one thing that I supported happened, right? I don't think seeing all these people sick and die justifies anything like that. I'm not a utilitarian in that sense. Have you heard of objectivist millennial? No. Any opinions? I haven't heard of it. She used to work at AOI, does YouTube videos. Thanks for what you do. Happy New Year. No, I don't know who that is. I'll have to look her up. She worked at AOI. I wonder when. Even though states like Texas and Florida are economically freer than New York and California, they have less educated and motivated populations. Happy New Year, you're on. Who are some of your favorite non-objectivist intellectuals? Yes, I mean, I think that's right. I think one of the things people forget when they complain about California and New York is that that's where this country produces. New York on Wall Street, California in Silicon Valley and Hollywood, production gets done. And there are all kinds of reasons why that is. But, a lot of states, Alabama, Mississippi, score higher on the Economic Freedom Index than New York and California, but you wouldn't want to live there. And, and maybe some of you do. I don't want to insult you, but a lot of us wouldn't want to live there. And part of it's cultural. Part of it is it's just not where the minds are in terms of entrepreneurs. The entrepreneurs are in California to a large extent. Now, some of them now have been moving for a couple of decades to Texas, to other places. And I hope it becomes Austin, Texas. I love Austin, Texas. But don't underestimate the economic power that is New York and California. And don't overestimate some of the other parts of the country. Who are some of your favorite non-objectivist intellectuals? Oh, I don't know. Off the fly. I mean, I like Steven Pinker, as I've said. I like... who do I like? I mean, in political commentary, sometimes I like Ben Shapiro. I like the Weinstein brothers. I find generally the intellectual dark web are people I listen to, I follow. I like some things that Douglas Murray says and some things I object to critically. I like Ridley's work. I like the free market libertarian type economists. I like the, and I've said on the show, people like John Cochran, who is not who is a free market guy. I like people I've interviewed on the show. That would be another good, Norberg. I like Norberg from Sweden. So I got into a disagreement about whether bankers were the first investors and whether there is a major difference between the two. Can you give your thoughts? Also, any thoughts on the House of Morgan about J.P. Morgan? I like John Tamny. I like Jeff Jacoby. People are adding people there. I want to follow David Deutsch more carefully because a number of people that I like are big fans of David Deutsch. So I need to follow him more carefully. House of Morgan, I think, is a good book. I don't know enough to tell you how objective it is. We've got anti-Semites in the house on the chat. Always fun to have you around. So I don't know how accurate it is, but I enjoyed it. I think it's worth reading. Is there a difference between an investor and a banker? Yes. I think you can be an investor without being a banker. Bankers do invest in companies, but investors don't do banking. So there might have been investors before they were bankers. Bankers they take in deposits and they give out loans. That's what a bank is. That's the essence of banking. And investing is taking an equity position in a business. Banks can do that. Certainly JP Morgan did that. Today they're not allowed to do it for a variety of regulatory reasons. But banks particularly start out as depository institutions and then make loans. Sometimes I like Victor Davis Hanson. I like Victor Davis Hanson on military history, not on immigration, not on Trump, not on the state of the world, but on military history. All right, let's see. In the world of the Fountainhead, how successful could Gail Wynant have been if he had Howard Roark's integrity? Could he have run honest and quality newspapers around the country, or was there not a market for them? Might not have been able to run enough, a large enough newspaper. Hard to tell in the world of the Fountainhead whether he could have been successful at doing that. But certainly could have been a businessman. I don't think Gail Wynant had to be a newspaperman. He could have been a businessman. Now, if he wanted to be a newspaperman, maybe he would have remained small and run an honest quality small newspaper. Why is that bad? Life is not about the money or the size. And when you understand it, it's about the quality. When I'm debating people about objectivism, I often hear the rebuttal, it's too black and white thinking. They never say it doesn't make sense. It's as if they don't like the fact that it does make sense. If it's simple and makes sense, it just cannot be true. Yeah, I think that's right. There's a worship of complexity. There's a worship of the hard to understand that people have. And objectivism is understandable, and it makes sense, and it's straightforward, and you can live by it, and they object to that. And they've been trained. For example, the morality is something you cannot achieve. That's the whole point, is you can't achieve it. So when they see objectivism and it has a morality that is achievable, then it can't be real. It can't be morality. It's too black and white. Why? Because it's achievable? Yeah, because Christianity has told them the morality is not achievable unless you're willing to go up on a cross. Texas is a great state, by the way. Just thought I'd say that just because I love Austin, I love the area, I love the people, good friends in Houston, friends in Dallas. It's just, there's a vibe to the place that I really enjoy. Even though Austin is blue, not everybody in Austin is blue. And I don't like the blue-red. Austin is left in a sense of leftist, a lot of leftists. It's a university town after all, so it's to be expected. But there's definitely something about Texas that I like. God, I don't think I'm halfway through. All right, quicker answers. That's what I need, quicker answers. What makes people irrational? That they never taught how to think, or they don't have any desire to think in a reality. Both. So certainly some people, they don't have a desire to it. That's the fundamental. They don't focus, they don't initiate, they don't engage. And to some extent, even if you're not really taught how to think, you still do it. Like none of us were taught how to think, and yet we are rational. And that's because we have a strong desire. And where does that desire come from? It's a choice we've made. It's a fundamental choice you make. But as you make thinking, being rational, more painful, more difficult, if you make being in focus more painful or difficult. For example, a child who asks, why, and the mother just slaps them every time they ask why. Stop it. I'm sick and tired of your why questions. That child will shut down at some point. Not every child, but some of them will shut down. Some of them, the effort becomes too much. Right? All right. We're getting questions again. Guys, I can't take any more questions. I'm sorry. I know this is all great, and but there's just too many questions. I'll be here all night. We're 2 hours, and the end of the questions is nowhere near in sight. All right, so we're going to keep going. That's funny. I just said Israel shouldn't get any money from the United States. Didn't I say that? I think I said that earlier in the show. But the anti-Semites never stop. Never stop. That's me commenting on a comment. Okay. What specific example of government spending inhibits economic growth? All government spending, other than that necessary for economic growth to happen. So, for economic growth to happen, you need defense. For economic growth to happen, you need a court system. For economic growth to happen, you need a police force. You need the rule of law. Anything beyond that inhibits economic growth because it takes money away from production and shifts it to waste. I love ARITOS, FEE, AIER, etc. So, can all the leaders please strive for more areas to find common ground to coordinate on? Within the broader liberty movement in 2021, if only based on how bad they say things could get. Yeah, fine. We do, to a large extent, cooperate with all those entities, much more, or some of those entities, much more than we used to. And when we don't cooperate with somebody, there's a reason for it. So, within the scope of what we think is good for the movement, what we think is good for freedom, what we think is good for objectivism, not in 2021, but for the next 50 years, within the scope of that, we work with lots of other groups. Did Marx talk about duty the same way Kant did? Duty ethics seems more like a fascist attribute. Social justice warriors emphasize being spoiled brats rather than duty. I don't think Marx talked about duty in the way Kant did or in the way other German philosophers did. So I don't think so. I think you're right. What do you make of the exodus from California? I'm one of them. I'm exiting. Why haven't red states like Idaho surpassed blue states economically? Low tax is not enough, still too altruistic. Yeah, low taxes are not enough. You have to have a culture of innovation, a culture of success, a culture that accepts failure, a culture of education. You have to have great universities. One of the reasons that California is what it is because of Stanford and Berkeley. And the fact that Stanford and Berkeley have great engineering schools and science departments. So that a whole ecosystem built around there to create Silicon Valley. And the historical fact that HP and Fairchild Semiconductors moved here as kind of the first technology companies that got founded in the Valley. And then they spun off a bunch of other companies and a bunch of other entrepreneurs. And again, this interaction and then the network effect and everything. There's massive benefits to having all the programmers and all the science guys and all the entrepreneurs and all the innovators and all the forward thinkers in a small geographic area where they can interact with one another, feed off of each other, hire from one another, and really just inspire one another. So Silicon Valley is hard to replicate. Other parts of the world and other countries and other cities have tried, and it's very, very hard because of the massive network that exists in Silicon Valley that is just unmatched anywhere else. Hopefully, a place like Austin can one day match it. But it's very difficult. Israel matches it pretty well because Israel's a small country with a lot of innovation and a lot of entrepreneurs and a lot of technology. But Idaho just doesn't have it. Doesn't have a great university. It doesn't have the scale, the number of people. So it's hard to leave the scale. So it's hard to leave California. And then even if you do, some people go to Austin. Some people go to Nashville. Some people go to Seattle. Some people go to Portland. Some people go to Idaho. And they disperse. They don't all go to the same place. And it's hard to build a center. It's very, very hard. There are a bunch of historical, cultural reasons why it's Silicon Valley. And Silicon Valley is not somewhere else. And those are almost impossible to replicate artificially. They happen organically or they don't happen at all. And typically they don't happen because it's too hard. Tobias, thank you. And I know it's a question in addition to the money, and I appreciate that, but I'm asking everybody not to ask any more questions. I answer them, and then new ones come in, and woo. All right, keep going. If a contemporary of Immanuel Kant realized what he was, would it have been immoral for them to burn him and his works alive? Yes. It would be wrong of him to kill. You don't kill somebody you disagree with. You obliterate the idea of rights. You obliterate the idea of freedom. You obliterate the idea of liberty. And then how can you be a defender of rights, liberty, and freedom? You can't. So you certainly can burn his works if you buy them, but you can't kill him. You can't do him physical damage. You can argue against him. It's a battle of ideas. Right? Battle of ideas. But every time you violate somebody else's rights, you're rejecting the idea of rights. And you're rejecting the idea of liberty and freedom. And you're fighting against it. Do New Yorkers remind you of Israelis? Is that why you couldn't live here? No, it's not why I couldn't live in New York. But yes, New Yorkers do remind me of Israelis. But they're moderate, mild versions of Israelis. So I always used to say all the flights to Israel stop in New York. You get off the plane and you get a little ready. It's prep for going to Israel. They're obnoxious. They're full of energy and obnoxious. And you go, okay, I'm getting, and then when you get to Israel, you really get the full-on obnoxiousness of Israelis. So it's prep. It's training, instant training. Thank you. Great answer, Reed Dagny's post-crash statement. Love the show. Thank you. Is Dr. Fauci a nihilist or fascist? I think he's neither one of them. I think he's mistaken on many of his statements, but I don't think he's either a nihilist or fascist. I don't think he's necessarily a bad guy, even though he's wrong on some things. But he's particularly wrong on the political implications of things. But that's not his job. It's not his role. He shouldn't be involved in those kind of things. He shouldn't be involved in those decisions. He should say what the science says and then let others make the political decisions about what that implies. He's not good at that necessarily. But this idea that he is the devil, I think, is very wrong. Oh, well. All right, we keep getting more questions. All right. Why did the bioethicist get the rollout of the vaccine prioritizing by equity so wrong? What does this say about modern ethicists? They're crap. That's what it says. The bad, the not ethicists, at the end of the day, they are people. They're people who are very influenced by pressure groups, and the ethics is altruistic. It's not pro-life. It's not pro-individual life. The bioethicists got it wrong because they're not good ethicists. They're not good philosophers. They're not good thinkers. And by the way, notice how good the drug development. Oh, I skipped a bunch of questions. How good the drug development is, because it's in the private sector. Drug distribution is government, and it's terrible. Government and intellectuals, like the ethicists. Is the reason that 15 million wasn't significantly raised prices and caused massive unemployment because so many low-skilled employees are now working off the books and under the table, turning good people into lawbreakers? I think that's partially it, but I don't know. I'm not sure what the 15 MW is. But there's some black market going on. But, the U.S. has a very complex economy, and the way it manifests itself in the economy and the way the damage is done in the economy is not always straightforward and easy to see. And I've done shows on that, and I could do more. I'll do more on that. I think it's an interesting question. Man, you talk about 85-inch televisions. It sparked my interest. This has made me question why I'm always worried about contradictory joy when spending money, even if the spending is well within my means. Thanks for the food for thought in 2020. Yes, yes, yes. If there's one thing you get out of the Yaron Brooks show, Forget about Trump and COVID and politics and budgets and economics and stuff. The one thing, minimum wage. Okay, I'll do a show on the minimum wage. I mean, partially because the minimum wage only affects a certain number of employees, partially because it's being phased in, so almost nobody's getting $15 an hour, partially because vast parts of the country don't have $15 minimum wages. So there's a lot of reasons why the minimum wage does not cause the kind of impact that we would expect it. The one thing I want you to get from my show is live with a capital L. Live. And that means spend money. Within your means, of course. But spend it and enjoy spending it. Enjoy spending your money. Yeah, guys, as you're reminded that you can still contribute to the show without asking a question. You can do $5, $2, $10, $20, $100, $500. We're at 5,000 something, 5,500 plus. And that's going to be matched by 5,000 for over 10,000, but you guys can still do it. Thank you for what you do. You're on. All the best to you in the new year. Question: what is the best way to educate and bring up thoughtful, rational children? Emphasize being rational. Emphasize being rational. Model it yourself, and emphasize that that's what you expect of them within their ability. Right? A 2-year-old can't be rational. But as they grow older, you expect more from them. Do you think in 30 years, most of the mixed economies of the world will be more tilted towards markets? 30 years. Maybe. Maybe, if we do our jobs. But more likely, 30 years from now, will be tilted towards authoritarianism. And the tilt towards free markets will shift in about, probably maybe more like 50 years. But these things are completely arbitrary. I don't know. I don't know what the time frame is. Hard for me to tell what 30 years will bring. Is Jewish, somebody says focus on reality. Yeah, teach your kids to focus on reality, focus on facts, manage their emotions. That is, recognize their emotions, appreciate their emotions. Don't use emotions as tools of cognition. Be rational, in other words. Is Jewish culture better than any other? That's why Jews are more successful than any other. Well, successful in what terms? The ultimate success in life is happiness. Are Jews happier than other people? I don't know. I doubt it, right? Scott, test passed. So Jewish culture is good in that it supports education and learning. It's pro-intellectuals, and it's pro-production. It's pro-achievement. And in all those senses, yes, that's why Jews are more successful. And in all those senses, that also leads to more happiness. But it also has all kinds of forms of guilt built in, and guilt that then leads them to be leftists and socialists, and with all the problems that leads to. So it's a very mixed culture, but it certainly has, from a capitalist perspective and an intellectual perspective, certain virtues that emphasize learning and production that are positive. Any thoughts on a long-term political merger with Canada? I see the inevitable convergence of Canadian culture into one that is more American, for better or worse. The music is American, the political ethos is American, etc. I hope so. I don't see why there are two countries. I think there should be one. The Republicans will object because Canadians are more likely to vote Democratic. But put aside politics, North America should be one country. I just don't see why you need so many countries in such a small, in one place. I think Canada and the United States should be one country, yes. Will they be? I don't know. No idea. Have you seen Jean Noël? No, I haven't. I've heard about it. I want to see it. So it's on my to-see list. It's an anti-World War I movie, Christmas movie. Anti-World War I Christmas. Have you watched the show Expanse? It's interesting science fiction in its 5th season on Amazon. Yes, I've talked about Expanse on my show. I love Expanse. I think it's an excellent show, character-driven, primarily character-driven. The plot is so-so, but the characters are fantastic. The conflicts are good. I enjoyed it a lot. So I have not started watching the first season, so no spoilers, please. But I watched the first 4 seasons, particularly the first 2 were exceptional. Can you go through some Ayn Rand videos like you do with other videos? And is there a chance you can make a documentary film equal as unfair? Documentary films are super expensive to make. Really, really, really expensive. And then very few people watch them. So if somebody came and said, here's $500,000 to make it, then I would do it. But short of that, I'm not. It's too much work and too hard to raise the money. Whether Hitler was influenced by Kant is not important. Ideas led to an irrational society, which led to a lunatic in power. It's a sign of bad ideas that the U.S. election was a paranoid narcissist versus a mental weakling. I agree about that. But I do think it's important that it was Kant, because it's important to know what ideas you need to fight. And again, I said this last show, I think. It's not that the Nazis held the Kantian ideas as Kant wrote them. It's the impact Kant had on German culture, on other philosophers, on the way the educational system worked, on German art, on German scientists, that ultimately led to a culture that made Hitler possible. It doesn't mean Hitler read Kant and said, yes, this is what I want, this is what I'm going to do, therefore I'm going to kill 6 million Jews. That's not how it works. Again, read Dominus Parallels. But to know what to fight, we need to know the causal relationships in history. We need to know what ideas are bad and why and how they lead to bad. And the same thing about the good. It's not like we will establish a free world because everybody reads Ayn Rand. No, it's because some people who read Ayn Rand become intellectuals, become teachers, become physicists, become teachers, artists, and we change the culture. Not because the culture reads Ayn Rand, but because the values of Ayn Rand get embedded in the culture by the people who take the ideas of Ayn Rand seriously. I would go through Ayn Rand video, but I'm not sure what do I have to add? So I'm not going to do it. No, I'm not going to go through a Rand video because I have nothing to add. I can only detract. She was a genius. I'm not. So just listen to Ayn Rand. All right, guys, you can still contribute. We can still make it to 6,000. We're at 5,671. So just do $10 and we can get there. We can get there. Okay. What was your favorite small arms weapon while in the military? AK-47. Also, did you ever shoot an Israeli military industry? Desert Eagle. They didn't exist when I was in the army. Is it wrong to compare a gun to a work of art? Yes, there's nothing about a gun that's a work of art. It's not wrong to compare a gun to some other manufactured, it's not wrong to compare a gun to an iPhone, let's say, in terms of the beauty of its making, the efficacy, but it's not art. It might have an aesthetic quality, but it's not art. I call SuperChat's business consulting for tax purposes, so it is tax deductible to me. That's great. I accepted a PPP loan, and I agree with the rationale that ARI used to justify it. When does accepting government money become looting? Well, A, when you lobby for it, and yeah, so it's looting when you pro the government handing out the money. It's looting when you vote for it. It's looting when you lobby for it. It's looting when you argue intellectually for it. That's looting. I don't blame the recipient for the looting. I blame the advocates for the looting. I blame the government for the looting and the people who support the government. Is it irrational to be excited for the end of 2020? All of the problems in the world today will still be there when we get up tomorrow. The expectation that turning the page in the calendar will change anything seems silly. Well, of course it does. And it is silly, right? Nothing's going to change tomorrow. But I don't think it's wrong to have certain pointers in life, to have markers, like a birthday. And like we're changing the year. It's an arbitrary point, but we're changing the year. The year flips. And everything that, or not everything, much of what happened in 2020 sucked. And when you flip to 2021, psychologically and in other respects, okay, it's not 2020. Right? You've got a new marker. And a new marker is also a new opportunity. It orients you towards the future. It orients us towards tomorrow. It could be that we look at 2021 and say it was worse than 2020. I hope not, but it could be. But there's nothing wrong with saying this is an end of a period, which we mark. We'll think of this as 2020, the stuff that happened then. And we would like, not expect, we would like, and we're working towards, that 2021 things will be better. Not because the digit flipped, but because time has passed and we're changing things in our lives and we can see things are changing in the world out there, or not, right? So, yeah, I mean, if you're overly excited about the idea that 2021 is going to be a better year, then yeah, that's irrational because you have no basis for that. You don't know that's going to happen. But to have a mark, to celebrate that the year is gone, that the bad stuff is over, and to be hopeful, to be positive about the future is not a bad thing. Okay, between Bud Brigham from the annual report and tonight's matcha, plus some Miri and others, Ben Bear and others, Tara Smith and everybody else in Austin, Texas who is an objectivist, and many of them, is ARI thinking of a move to Austin? I'm not allowed to say. Maybe. It's a possibility. We will see. Stay tuned. A year ago, could you ever imagine you would be making $5,000 on a super chat? No, I couldn't. This is evidence of our movement is growing stronger and more aggressive and changing the world. Yes. And part of this is, I've learned from fundraising, you have to ask. And it's not just about asking, it's about, you got to be out there. You got to be out there. You got to do stuff. And I know that some people love the show, some people like the show, some people don't like it particularly, some people only like some stuff. And that's great. And some people listen to the show for a year and then stop for a while, and some people listen on and off or whatever. But you know, the show is I love it, and many of you love it, and it gets you energized, and it gets new people in the door, and it gets new people excited about objectivism. And maybe at some point you stop listening, which is fine. As if I've had that impact on you, if I've got you to read Ayn Rand, if I've got you to take life with a capital L seriously, then so be it. All right. But yes, I think things are going well, and we keep pushing, and we look for opportunities. Jesus, more questions. You got to stop this, guys. I know new people are joining the show and haven't heard, but I really can't take any more questions. I'm going to drop you. You know the difference between me and like Rush Limbaugh, somebody like that who does a 3-hour show, is that they have commercial breaks. This is 3 hours of me talking nonstop. Not that I'm complaining. I'm just saying it's a lot. And you keep asking questions. There we go. Big push for questions. I just said don't ask me questions. All right, but we do have, Scott says, thank you for exposing me to these ideas throughout 2020. Finally started reading Ayn Rand. Yes, that is a victory in my bigger than the money, right? Halfway through the Fountainhead. Happy New Year from Northern Ireland. Fantastic. Thank you, Scott. Thank you for the support. Thank you for reading The Fountainhead. I hope you enjoyed. Hope you read Atlas Shrugged next and then a nonfiction. Sivan writes, thank you for all the work and support. We all appreciate everything you do, Sivan and Itzan. Thank you, guys. Thanks for the support over the years. And thank you for listening to the show and watching the show. Really appreciate it. And, of course, for the financial support. Tim Robinson writes, thanks, Yaron, for all the work over the years. You and others who promote Ayn Rand are an inspiration. Happy New Year to yours and everyone listening. Thank you. All right, let's see. What can Idaho, Wyoming, Tennessee, Florida, and Texas do to create these ecosystems on a smaller scale? How do you view land as an asset? I mean, what they could do is they could deregulate. The fact is that most of those states are very heavily regulated. Florida is the least regulated, and Florida is booming as a consequence, relatively speaking. But Wyoming, Idaho, Texas have a lot of regulations, have a lot of control. The second thing they could do is just give an aura of, maybe they can privatize schools or they can privatize universities. Make privatization education a priority. So focus in on some area that you can really bring energy to, like education, really that really have an impact. And cut taxes, cut regulations, cut government spending. Make it about the whole state, about achievement and success. And you'll get better people. How do you view land as an asset? It depends where. I mean, I view it as an investment, and it depends where, it depends for how long, it depends what the asset's being used, like is it agricultural land? So it depends. You'd have to ask me more specifically. I gave $100 to the Sanders campaign in 2016. I'm still getting those texts from his supporters. This is the counteract that I'll bet a cent less. Thank you for changing my life for the better you run. Excellent. We got a Sanders supporter, guys. That is brilliant. Brilliant, brilliant. And he contributed $99 today. $99.99. Instead of imposing restrictions on economic activity, the government should require testing of everyone except those who opt out for self-quarantining, test, isolate, trace. I don't think you have to impose, I don't think you have to require testing. I'm against requiring testing. All you have to do is provide mass testing and encourage people to do it. Get people to do it rather than the opposition to testing coming out of the Trump campaign. And the complete disaster that was the development of tests by the U.S. government. I'll comment on that in a future show because there's a big story on that. Ryan, Happy New Year. All right, quickly. You talk about two axes, rational versus irrational, individual versus collective. Come up with examples. What is this? I'm missing some text. Come up with examples of groups in each quadrant except for rational plus collectivist. Any examples you can think of? No, there's no rational and collectivist. There's a contradiction. Rationality requires independence. Collectivism denies independence. You can't be both. Happy New Year. As AI becomes increasingly sophisticated and widespread, what role do governments have, if any, in regulating how it's used? Unless it is used to violate individual rights, the government has no role in regulating it, controlling it. So if it's used as a weapon in some way or another, then government can get involved. But as long as it's not violating rights, then, violating your privacy, used to steal your stuff, used to watch over you, used to, harass you in some way, then government has no role. Ike is going over his donation to Sanders. Thank you. Yes, this is a much better cause than Bernie Sanders. But that's great to have somebody who voted for Bernie Sanders 2016 now supporting the Ron Brooks Show. That's progress. Is Dave Hammond's work in physics any good? I think so. And not everything. I think some of his criticism of modern physics is wrong, based on people who know physics that I've talked to. But I think some of his stuff is very good. So I think it's good, but you have to judge for yourself, and you have to have other sources of information, because I'm not a physicist. What is your view on the Caldwell's law? I don't think I know Caldwell's law. I'm keeping this question so I can research it and figure out what it is. Maybe in a future show I'll answer. What would you do if you raised $69,420 tonight? Where does that number come from? I'd celebrate even more tonight. What would I do? My life wouldn't change. I'd be really, really happy that I raised the money, that somebody appreciated the work as much as they do. But it wouldn't change my life. That would have to be 69 million to change my life. Or so maybe 6.9 million would be significant. 690,000 wouldn't be bad either. All right. Why are self-labeled empathetic leftists so full of hate for all. Healthcare is, what is going on here? Sorry, the screen is moving on me. Medicare for all, healthcare is a right, violate COVID restrictions, for example. Well, because, look, they're frustrated altruists. They're altruists who can't live up to their moral standards. They hate the world. They reject the world. And they're not really empathetic. They're not really interested in other people. They're interested in appeasing their own guilt. So it's not that they're benevolent. They're empathetic because they feel for other people. And some of them really are, and most of them are not. Most of them are just haters, and they're altruists. So they know they should care about other people. Whether they do or not, I doubt that many of them do. No question. Thanks for all the hard work you're on. You provide spiritual fuel similar to that provided by art. Happy holidays. Happy New Year best. Thank you. Thank you, Tom. Do you like, and I'm going the wrong way. What is your, why are we did that. Do you think 2021 will actually be better than 2020? I don't know. Or is it wishful thinking? Is there any way to tell? How long until things start to change? What do you think going into the new year? I mean, I think in certain respects things will be better. I mean, we'll have divided government, I hope. We'll know next week. If Republicans win the Senate, we'll have divided government. That'll be better. We won't have Trump. That'll be better. COVID will go because we'll get a vaccine. That'll be better. Will anything fundamentally change? No. Is the culture going to change? Are the intellectuals going to be better? Are they going to be more rational? Is going to be more rationality in the world? No, none of that will happen. But COVID, Trump, divided government, yeah, those are things that I think would make 2021 better, primarily because 2020 was really, really, really bad. I didn't really talk about it at the beginning of the show, how bad it was. Maybe I'll do that in a future show, but it was a really, really bad year. And I think that while there will be worse years in the future, likely, 2021, just because of the reality that we're facing going into 21, is probably going to be marginally better than 2020. To a large extent because Trump will not be president and because COVID will probably not be an issue as much, at least from the summer on. Do you think it is irrational to hold my position of never reconciling with these corona fanatics? I can truly never forgive what government has done in 2020. I will never reconcile with anyone supporting these actions. No, I don't think it's irrational. I mean, I think that what's happened is horrific. It's a huge move towards authoritarianism. I just think you have to realize that it was not the case that there were rational voices out there. It's not the case that the Trump administration was a rational voice. It's everybody associated with COVID is wrong. I'm not sure I can forgive the people who think that it's a conspiracy theory and nothing happened, and therefore government should have done nothing, zilch, or the people who wanted lockdowns across the board. So I'm not sure you can forgive any one of them. And again, don't fall into the trap of just one side of this. The whole thing, from beginning to end, if you read about the CDC and how it completely screwed up the testing, if you read about the Trump administration and how it dealt with this starting in January, you should be furious. Not just at Cuomo and Newsom and the nasty governors that shut us all down, but at the Trump administration, at the so-called experts, at all the people who told us that either it was nothing or we need to shut everything down. Right. Isn't the scientific method the methodological implementation of Aristotelianism epistemologically? Yes. Couldn't we reverse engineer the scientific method to implement objectivist epistemology for linguistics or grammar? Yeah, I mean, Leonard Peikoff just published his book on grammar, and I think some of that is there. Some of that is there, if I understand the question. All right, Corey is in the house. Corey, who I banned from YouTube. has had to take on a pseudonym, not to be banned from. Corey, thank you. You've been incredibly generous throughout the year. I really, really appreciate that. Thank you for this contribution, which puts us at, we'll find out in a minute, somebody will do the math, but very close to $6,000 plus the 5 match, which will make it $11,000. What's unban? Yes, okay. I'm copying this down. I'm putting it in bold, and I will find a way to unban you in 2021. We will find a way. If we have to go to YouTube headquarters and okay, copy. And, put it at the top of the page. Unban Corey. There we go. It's even in bold. Perfect. Perfect. All right. That'll be your New Year's gift. All right. Do you like the song Everybody Wants to Rule the World? I don't think I know the song. The lyrics and music video seem to be just to be celebrating freedom, but even capitalism. I don't know the song. So send me a link. Okay. We're done. I answered every single Super Chat question. So I want to end by basically giving you my New Year's 2021 best wishes, right? So first, let me just say I'm planning a lot of changes for the show. I mean, nothing dramatic in terms of this show, but adding one other new show. As I said, when I moved to the new house, new decor, new mics, not new mics, but new video, soundproofing, all kinds of stuff like that. Just a general upgrade and improvement to the show broadly. But what I really want to say is, I said it earlier and I say it a lot in my shows. New Year's is a good time to really sit down and think. Think about what? Well, about the most important thing you can think about, which is your life. Is it going the way you want it to go? Are you achieving the things you want to achieve? Are you being ruthless in pursuing happiness, in pursuing life, in pursuing your values? Are you being ruthless in adhering to a rational moral code, to being rational? But again, rational doesn't mean spark-like, unemotional, detached. The opposite, in a sense. It means passionate, valuer, living for those values, striving to achieve the values, fighting to achieve the values, working to achieve the values. Just fill in. But placing your life, your values, your enjoyment, your happiness at the center. And there's this Puritan element in American society and European society, which goes back to the 85-inch TV, which says, oh, don't spend too much. Don't have too much fun. Don't have too much pleasure. And as a consequence, Americans tend to get drunk, and Europeans do, tend to get drunk as a substitute for actual enjoyment, for actual pleasure. Pleasure. Find things that cause you pleasure. Please yourself. Enjoy yourself. Have fun. Don't do anything stupid now, but and pamper yourself, spoil yourself. I mean, start by achieving. Make sure to enjoy it. Now, of course, everything's at what price? Everything is a trade-off. But think about those trade-offs. Don't let the Christian guilt in you deny you the pleasure, deny you the values, deny you the spending the money. So pursue your values, work hard, achieve great things, and then enjoy your achievements and spend time enjoying your achievements and relish them. All right, before you leave, don't forget to like the show. Those likes make a difference. They impact viewership. The more likes, the better the algorithm deals with it. It's great to have so many comments because that helps the algorithm as well. The super chat, I mean, YouTube must love me because they get a lot of money off of my super chats. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, everybody, for contributing. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Thank you, everybody who supports the show monthly and doesn't use the super chat. Thank you, and you can do that on YourOnBookShow.com/support, on Patreon and Subscribestar, and on Locals. Thank you for all the people who've watched. We've had there'll be overall probably 500-600 people have watched the show over the last 2.5 hours. Segments of the show. There are 168 watching right now, 169, but there have been people watching all through, on and off. You can have a drink, but don't get drunk. Getting drunk is not advisable generally. Drinking is advisable. Getting drunk is not advisable. Have a great new year. Enjoy, celebrate. There's a lot of work to do when we get back. I'm not sure when the next show is going to be, so I'm warning you in advance that there's not going to be any shows this weekend. I'm traveling back to Puerto Rico, I hope. So I'm planning to fly back on Sunday, so maybe Monday, Tuesday we'll do shows. We will see once we get back and how things are going. But have a great new year. Enjoy yourselves. And let's keep the work going in 2021. Keep the work going in 2021. We need to convince more of Bernie's fans, or Bernie supporters, to switch to the Yaron Brook Show. How many Trump supporters do you think have switched to the Yaron Brook Show? I don't know. All right. 2020 sucked. I didn't get into how it sucked in all the different ways, not just politically, but personally. But 2020 sucked. And 2021, I hope, and I'm going to work hard at making sure it doesn't suck anywhere near as much. Partially, I've sold my house in California, buying a place in Puerto Rico. That is going to make 2021 better than 2020. Bye, everybody. Have a great night. Have a great 2021, and have a great life. And with that,